Hello, Jordan.
Good morning, Michael.
How are you?
Doing all right. How are you?
Not so bad. Not so bad.
Not so bad. Not so good. Is your glass half full or is your glass half empty?
What's that?
Is your glass half full or is it half empty?
I'm
going to analyze you.
Go for it. It'd be a good change of pace.
How was your week?
My week was okay. My week was consumed by the pursuit of gadgets as a form of trying to gain some sort of control or something like that with my life. So.
Oh shit, you and me both, man.
What are you looking at?
So I've had this realization that we're probably not going anywhere for a while. Yeah, I don't know. It's just this hunch I have. So I've been debating building a gaming rig for a while, like a PC gaming rig, and then doing like a whole chair setup with the steering wheel and pedals, like good stuff, not just like the crap, from Target to play Gran Turismo or whatever. So a friend of a friend is selling some really nice stuff for, really heavy discount. And it's like the stars are kind of aligning on that. And since we're not, it's like there's no real reason to suspect I'm going to be able to go to the actual track anytime soon. So I figured this would be a cool way to brush up on my driving skills. So I've been starting down that rabbit hole, and it's like, Jesus, I've never built a PC from scratch before, and I'm having to learn how to do that. And luckily, there are a lot of sites that help you with that. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
So you're going to build the cost of a car to race, to have a race simulator?
No, it's not nearly that shit. I mean, it's less than a set of tires probably all in.
Really?
But
okay.
Yeah. I mean, a good set of tires.
I've seen some setups, man. Because the same thing that you're looking at, I don't know how I got sucked into this rabbit hole. I started getting YouTube suggestions for watching simulations, like simulated driving, and then I was like, wait a minute, I want to do that. And then some of the sets I was looking at were like just for the seat, like $2,000.
Oh hell no, I'm not good. I mean, it's like anything, you can spend as much as you want, but I'm trying to keep it, there's a point of diminishing returns with all that stuff. And it's like, do I need it to like have, 3-axis, moving you around and shit? No, it's fine if it just sits still and has a solid mount for a steering wheel. So
what if you really get into it and then you're disappointed?
Then we'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But for right now, it's probably not the best time to be spending huge amounts of money on going off the deep end on something. But yeah, it should be cool. We have like a room that's just kind of storage and stuff. So I think, it'll be nice to just set that up and be able to have something to do, hone my skills.
That's like the only place you're going to be now. They're going to see your work falling off.
Right. I'm going to be like a Twitch streamer for my living now. I don't even know what Twitch is, but I think that's the thing.
Yeah. I hear kids talk about it. Some kids that I see, but I have no concept. I don't know. It's like a streaming service, I guess.
Right. So what is the gadget rabbit hole that you're going down?
The gadget rabbit hole started out with looking for computers, obviously, because now we're doing, teleconferencing all day long, and just being able to get something where I can teleconference, I can have files on there, I can exchange files with billing and everybody that needs it. So it started out really practical, and then it ended up with, gandering through Amazon, looking at binoculars. Dude, the weirdest stuff. So I've been trying to tailor it. You never know, man.
Like for what? Bird watching? Like what are you doing?
It's I can look around out here. Sometimes there's animals. I found a coyote den. There's exciting things.
Oh,
I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool.
But it's the same problem that I feel like you and I both have with stuff. It's not just initially it was like, I need some magnification, and then it turned into $2,000 worth. It's like
I need to be able to read a newspaper on the moon.
Right. So I was like, all right, man, you're going way too far here. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's one thing I found myself getting better with that in as I get older, where I start to like find the line pretty quickly where I'm like, okay, I know what's going to happen. I know that, certain things like this racing thing. Yeah, I'm sure I'll use this for years to come, but there are certain things where I'm like, I'm going to pick up, playing guitar again. And then suddenly I've got like a $2,000 like Les Paul in my shopping cart. I'm like, okay, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to play with it a lot for like 3 weeks, and then it's going to taper off. And then I'll do it for years, but it's not going to be like, I'm not going to become Stevie Ray Vaughan or anything. So I find the line quicker now and try to bring it back, find good value.
You were talking about it in a previous episode, how you put things in your shopping cart You were looking at, I forgot what you were trying to build.
The model. Yeah, the model detailing
yes.
stuff. Yeah.
My sister taught me that in physical form, like in person. This was like 10 years ago. Like when I would be impulsive at a store, she'd be like, just put it in your cart, drive it around the store, see if you still want it.
I do that all the time. Like, or I actually buy it, but I don't take the tags. Like I buy like, some, I was telling you about that leather jacket a few like months ago. Yeah, whereas like I bought it, and I really liked it, but then after a few days, I was like, dude, like I'm going to wear this like once a quarter and I don't really need it. And then I just return. Like I do that shit all the time, or with Amazon, because you can impulse buy and you can impulse return,
Right. Oh, I got jackets, boy. I got all kinds of jackets.
We're going to have to retire like 5 years later because of the stupid shit that we buy. What else is new other than you got any good quarantine tales?
Nah, man. The best quarantine tales is within the gadget purchases. I think I mentioned this previously too. I bought some damn Nerf guns, so that there have been good Nerf battles that are pretty.
Yeah, you exciting. Said so that these things shoot hard enough.
They're like paintballs, man. I get sketched out. You hear them zipping past your face when they go, so it's exciting.
I don't know if I'm into that.
It's exciting, man.
I guess you got to have a little fear, otherwise it's not a very compelling dart gunfight, right?
Right. The first time I played paintball, I thought I was Rambo until I got shot. Like I was just like charging everything, and then I got lit up, and then I was hiding, and then the game had a whole different. The game had something different after that. This is kind of like that. You get a little stinger if you're too excited, if you're too impulsive when you're playing around.
I haven't been playing any dart gunning this end, but
if you listen, man, you don't have kids, you don't have a good excuse for dart gunning.
Oh, trust me.
If I saw you doing it, I think you're off.
Right? Then this gaming rig would have turned into a whole different thing. Yeah. I don't know, quarantine stuff. Dude, it's so weird going to the grocery store now and stuff where, I don't know if it's like this in Michigan, but here they're like limiting the number of people that could go into the stores, and everybody's like socially distancing in the line. So you roll up to the grocery store and there's like just this huge but really strewn out line of people across the whole parking lot, and it moves pretty quickly, but it's just a very bizarre new normal.
Right.
Sort of watching everybody with masks and gloves and staying away from each other. It's kind of nice though, because the grocery store, there's far fewer people inside, so you're like, I don't have anybody like ramming me down with their shopping cart. It's kind of silver lining to it.
Right. I mean, yeah, they have similar. I know some of the stores have a similar setup. I don't know if they're all that way. I mostly just call them in and have them dropped off. And I've been buying stuff from a lot of local places. Yeah, but I don't know. People are, it seems like for the most part in that area, being good about it, being compliant about it.
You never answered my text when I was asking if you thought that there would be more serial killers after this whole thing because everybody is walking around anonymous with masks. I think
there's more violence. I think there's more violence.
I'm seeing anecdotally, like there are on Nextdoor and just across social media and stuff. I'm seeing people show up in purporting to be like coronavirus testers and things like that, and they have their masks on and they're like, hey, we can come in and test you, and then they just, once they get in the house, they rob people.
No kidding.
But yeah, that's why I was thinking, like, what a perfect time. I don't know, this is terrible that somehow this popped into my mind, but like, just when you think about like how anonymous people are right now, I wondered if you're going to see, once the dust settles from this whole thing and they can study things, if they'll be like, oh wow, there were a handful of serial killers active during that time frame. I'm
not a serial killer expert, but from what no, but I did. I learned how to do personality testing on people who were being watched for. I don't know the specific. I think it's NGRI, which is not guilty for reasons of insanity. So I would look at their testing protocols, and that's how I learned how to do psychological testing. But from what I don't know, this could just be hearsay, but I believe that I heard somewhere, so look this up, whoever's listening, that there's a large appeal for the serial killer to get the details out and for people to recognize it. It's part of the interest or the gratification of the killing. So I don't know. I guess it would depend on
that the killing is happening, not that it's them.
Well, that the killing is happening and they want a lot of publicity for the killing happening. So it's like they get interested in the killing, but then they get interested in other people knowing about the killing. So if the media is flooded with, which it should be, information regarding a pandemic, maybe it's not going to put their thing at the top of the pile. So I don't know if it would be the most opportune. Maybe if you serial killers listen, hold off, wait until
just give it some time.
Right, wait until there's nothing good in the news, and then let your dark urges out.
Wait until Trump stops telling everybody to inject Lysol and mainline Lysol and Clorox, and then
it's a hard one. I feel bad for the guy. I feel very bad for the guy.
You feel bad for the guy?
I feel bad for him because I don't think he recognized that this was more than people liking you to run a country. And I think with a pandemic, there's no scapegoating. He's tried really, really as best as he can to scapegoat it. But it seems like with a pandemic, we are all in this problem. And we're all looking to answers from you as you are the figurehead, which obviously other people are, making the decisions or aiding in the decisions. But watching this guy unravel because he can't say a thing that gives him likes or, I don't know, give good media, I really feel like this guy's losing it with this kind of responsibility on him. And I wouldn't want to be responsible or whatever. I mean, that's one thing that's become super clear to me throughout this whole thing is that I wouldn't want to have to be making any decisions right now at that kind of, not just at his level, but at the level of even local government. It's just, there is no right answer here. And, the protests this week are a great example of that, where we're just seeing people on both sides that are like, we want to go, we want to be outside, we want to be in our boats, and we want to go back to work. And then the other side's like, Jesus Christ, like, stop running around with your AR-15s and just cool down for a minute. Like, we get that it sucks, but it's like there is literally no right decision here other than, I guess, the one that results in like the lowest loss of life. But either way, I mean, at least in normal life, usually there's kind of a decision that's very clearly, at least in hindsight, maybe the better of the two. And in this case, I think even once we have the hindsight, we won't know that these were the right decisions, right? Because best case scenario, things are less bad. They're not going to be good. We know that. And I think that's it's challenging. And I feel for everybody who's in those situations right now to have to make these decisions. Yeah, I mean, this is like, right, when you and I were trying to figure out what to talk about, it kept coming back to, well, the obvious is that there are many perspectives, but then the secondary part, it stemmed from you and I having a conversation about the protests and things like that, right? So the difficulty of compliance, right? Like, why, as humans, do we have difficulty with being compliant to a structure? So in this case, obviously, the compliance having to do with, sheltering in place or quarantining or whatever you want to call it in whatever area you're practicing this. But yeah, we've obviously seen a lot of people having a really different, including myself too, by the way, not compliant in the same way that's been, like we all, or for myself, I can't say we all, make little concessions or justifications for why, like for me, why I'm doing what I'm doing. I mentioned to you, I've gone for a few drives, which I don't feel like is some mortal thing, but that's the whole thing. Like, we just kind of make these justifications, or I do at least. Yeah. So I'm curious to pick your brain about why we have difficulty complying, specific to, what's going on, but then also more broadly, what's the deal? Why can't we just follow, what is said to be best for us?
Right. I mean, it's tough because I think I tend to, as I think we all do, to focus on the opposition, whoever that may be, and then also like the worst part of the opposition. So as I'm watching these protests, I'm watching the ones in Lansing, Michigan, because from Michigan, everybody I know for the better part is in Michigan. So it's obviously more relevant to me contextually. And then seeing these people showing up, gridlocking intersections, blocking emergency workers from getting, ambulances through to the hospitals, showing up with assault rifles. It's like, okay, while I empathize with wanting to get back to work, with wanting things to return to normal, um, I mean, they're just not going to right now, right? That's just not an option. It's not like a nice to have. The decision has been made, and I think for the right reasons. It's the least wrong decision, I think, with the information that we have at this point. And so when I see people showing up with guns and rallying like this, which just seems completely, I get that it's to protest the stripping away of rights, which I think it's also funny. Everybody's referring to this as God-given rights, which I keep imagining like God being there when John Hancock was signing the Constitution. But yeah, it's frustrating because I don't understand the connection between some of the things that they're doing, showing up in big trucks and blowing diesel all over like everybody as like a form of protest, or showing up with guns as a form of protest. It's like these have nothing to do with what the actual problem is, and the actual problem is a virus. And then you see these people are wearing masks too in some cases, which I think I also find is hilarious. It's like, so you don't deny that there's a problem, you just don't want the reaction to it to be the one that we have right now. And then of course you get into like political alignments. Like if Governor Whitmer was a Republican, would the decision have been made, and would people be reacting to it the way that they are? Because I think if we boil things down to their simplest form, it's like she's a Democrat, and most of the people showing up seem to be conservatives. And I mean, that seems to be the case across the country, right? It's like states where
I think there's my observation. There's probably more to it, but go ahead.
Well, I'm saying, I think if you're to, again, I'm stereotyping, but if you're thinking about the states that are having the big protests, they are states that either are right leaning or maybe they're kind of centrist, but there's maybe a blue governor who has made the decision to kind of be more actually conservative about the approach to reopening things, which is the irony of the whole thing. They want to be more careful. And I think you see the opposing side coming out of the woodwork to sort of protest that. And so there is a lot of politics involved in this whole thing, which is unfortunate because this is just not a political issue. And then also sort of the root cause of why I think people are most pissed off. Like I was seeing through reposting on Facebook, for example, people from Michigan getting really upset about not being able to go out on their boat, not understanding why that was something that was limited. It's like, I get that. I think it's frustrating. I'm going to ignore the fact that it was snowing in Michigan like a week ago. But, I think it's interesting that that's sort of those recreational activities are what people are glomming onto as sort of a reason that their rights have been stripped away. When the reality is, I don't think that it's the governor sitting in a room saying, you know what, let's not let people vote. I think it's about something more complicated, where it's like reduction in police force because they have limited resource right now. The police have to focus on policing the things that matter. Therefore, sending a deputy out in a boat to patrol the lake for a huge influx of boat activity is not something that makes sense. So let's not add that to the list of things that are okay, right? It's probably I don't know, I'm not in those meetings, but for decisions like that, where it's not that it's not going to cause a problem for the spread of the virus. It's that it's going to cause a problem for having an additional non-essential thing to police. Just like, they're preventing people from getting, I think, home improvement supplies. I've heard people talking about that. They're not doing that here, but they are apparently doing that in Michigan.
You can't, from my understanding of it, I haven't gone into those stores. I have received things from a home improvement store, curbside pickup. I think what it was about was you can't have those sections open in the store. I don't think you were unable to sell them, but
sure,
I don't know how to interpret it. So.
And again, it's like, yeah, that sucks. And, we're all sitting at home, so it'd be nice to kind of get some shit done while you have the time and while you're at your home. I know we are to some extent. Like, we're staring at our bedroom that is missing a piece of furniture or something, and it's like, wow, we really need to just wrap this shit up. But I think it's like, it's not essential. They're just trying to draw a line somewhere, because if you don't, that becomes a problem. And so fast forward to, the protests, and a lot of it, I mean, for sure, a lot of it is about being able to return to work. A lot of people are upset because they're being prohibited to return to maybe a service job or something that has high contact. And that's frustrating because now they can't pay their bills. And, we'll ignore that, it seems like the loan deference and assistance and things are really ramping up to try to help ease that pain. But I mean, there are for sure people in a scenario right now that is not tenable, where they're not taking in money and they need to pay bills. And that is terrible. So faced with that, I understand. I understand why you'd be upset and you'd want to open things back up, because it's either A, okay, we lower the risk, or B, we guarantee that I can't, whatever, feed myself, feed my family, pay my bills, keep the lights on. And that's a shitty choice to have to make. But at the end of the day, and this is what you and I were talking about, I just wonder and think about the fact that somebody else who is supposed to be making these decisions with way more information than what we have has made this decision and has been more or less hopefully supported by legislation and other decision makers at that level. Why is it so hard for people to just trust that decision? It's like when it doesn't align with what they had in their mind, then they're not only going to just quietly disagree with it, they're going to show up in force and create an opposition to it to try to reverse the decision,
Sure. In my when I was first hearing about this, I feel like I maybe had too intellectual of an idea about it, perhaps. Not because I'm intellectual, because the idea was too intellectualized. And I was thinking of it from the perspective of, maybe there will be people that protest, and somehow there will be a framework for how to proceed in these sort of situations that people are more aware of, so that it doesn't feel as improvised as, I don't know how you would improvise this, but that doesn't feel as improvised. So there's, a framework that everyone is aware of and can be able to digest ahead of time and have some sort of structure that they, know what the limits are and things like that, opposed to it just getting sprung on them. The reality of what happened, though, is interesting because even, like those things you mentioned, boating, landscaping, whatever it was, right? There's something in us that, at least to me, this seems like a very different type of non-compliance, where people are having like their feelings hurt, which I work in the field of feelings, so I don't want to disregard what those mean. But they're having their feelings hurt, and when comparing it to, in this case, and we've talked about this before, like the paths that never merge, intellect and like the head and the heart have a hard time intersecting and coming up with a plan with each other. But anyhow, their feelings seem to be hurt, their comforts seem to be taken away, and the people that are the most disconnected. So that's what you mentioned, it was a lot of conservatives. I think it's a specific demographic of people who got disconnected from work and they feel disenfranchised, that seem to be kind of unifying in conservative groups in deciding that this is a constitutional issue, which I could see how they would kind of follow that and make that connection. But I think it's more so that they're being non-compliant in this case because they're afraid, and their fear is leading them to seek comforts like boating or gardening or, just the kind of stuff we do for comfort instead of paying attention to some of the logical things. Like you said, what is the right decision? It's like people's health or the economy, right? You can look at these both very objectively. I think when it comes down to it, it sounds like the powers have decided on a situation that felt more ethical to, harm the economy at the health of the people, or an attempt to help the people. But the ones who are most stripped away from their creature comforts, like you've mentioned, you've been working a lot. I've been working not as much as I usually work, but about 80% of what I usually work. And then the other 20% is like I have to make sure the kids get their schoolwork done and junk like that. So I'm pretty busy. You're pretty busy. For the people that have that aren't busy, that don't have a sense of purpose anymore, and they don't have their creature comforts, it's like leading them to a place where it's not a typical sort of non-compliance. It's like a very emotional, I don't want to minimize it, but like tantrum-like reaction that's really separating people from the reality of the situation. And on top of that, like you mentioned, the figurehead that we have when we're all looking for comfort, we look to mom or dad. And if mom or dad is kind of spinning out, it's not so good for us either. It's not so good for us. And when I say mom and dad, I mean some of the powers that be that you see on TV every night that have really high ratings are really spinning out, and it doesn't make us feel any more comfortable. If I can't have my boat, and I can't have my garden, and I can't have my golf, and my dad's not giving me a clear message here, and I think that's really what's going on.
I think it's super reasonable in terms of those dots. Like connecting those dots doesn't bother me as much, and I think like I guess it is to your reference of like a tantrum like reaction. It's that I have a problem with, and I question. And it's this idea that like there's an inference that because these decisions have been made to lock things down, to take precautions, and not just to make them optional, which by the way, if they were optional, almost no one would adhere to the guidelines, right? I mean, we know that.
Sure.
I think the inference that this is somehow intentional as a way of taking away rights, like that government is seizing the opportunity to restrict your gun rights, for example. Like I've seen that popping up where it's like this is all, and just like that, they stopped us from assembling, and they stopped us from having our guns. And it's like the thought that this is somehow a conspiracy by liberals to take your guns away, as somebody who's into guns, I just find hilarious and insane. I think that's it's like we're doing the best we can with the information that we have. People are sitting around studying this information and making a decision. Yes, the conclusion and the reaction and the path forward sucks. Yes, it's easy for you and I to say because we're still employed and we're still working. But the alternative is we don't have any restrictions in place. We open things up and somebody you love dies. I mean, I think that's kind of the alternative that you have to ask yourself. And if you're okay with that, then it's a more fundamental question, which is like, then do we just put the power in the individuals to make the decision on whether or not they want to open themselves up for risk and open their loved ones up to risk? And, sure, if I want to stay home and stop the spread or prevent exposure to myself, can I do that? And can we make that decision? And we'll just reevaluate later, I guess. There's an argument to be had there, I suppose. It all but guarantees that the resulting deaths would climb. But we make decisions like that all the time. I mean, there are laws that we pass where it's like, we know, you can elect not to ride a motorcycle. You can elect to ride a motorcycle without wearing a helmet in some states. That is a decision that leads to a greater loss of life, but it's your decision, right? That's a little bit more one-to-one in terms of who it affects, right? You're not, it's not by like you not wearing a helmet that maybe grandma's going to die as a result.
This feels comparable to secondhand smoke to me.
But secondhand smoke is a great example, right? So it's like, we've cracked down on that, right? I mean, it's like smoking in public really, other than in a handful of places that I can think of, like Vegas, you don't come across that anymore in restaurants. And that has taken how long? I mean, we've known about the dangers of that for decades, and it wasn't until past 10 years that really we saw
the arguments with that too. So I don't know if you smoke anymore. You and I used to smoke together. I don't smoke anymore.
Yeah, like briefly in like high school days.
Yeah. So no, I smoked for a long time, man. I smoked from like 18 to like 28, I think. So like
that's why you got that rich voice,
right? That's why it's there. Yeah, that's what you should do, kids. Right. So I smoked for about 10 years, but for me, that argument of don't smoke indoors, I was cool with it, but obviously other people were not, and they felt like their rights were being violated, right? Or not rights in the constitutional sense or whatever, but they felt like someone was telling them what to do. And with that too, the reason why that one popped in my head was smoking is a soothing activity. And people were having difficulty because their soothing activity was being, from their perspective, taken away from them, right? So I think everyone would agree that it'd be pretty hard for me to really believe you if you interpreted the data and you looked at it and you said, I don't know, it's not conclusive, right? It'd be pretty hard for me to believe that you're being honest if you read the data and you told me that you don't believe that there are consequences to smoking. But because it's taking away from your soothing activity, suddenly there's some sort of psychological defense or like psychological issue where you're not necessarily paying attention to the head anymore. It's like the heart wants what it wants and it wants to smoke, and you're trying to stop me from smoking. So therefore I'm going to feel violated and going to be non-compliant. It feels like a very different type of, like these protests feel very different. I feel like there's room for protest. I genuinely believe that there's a lot of room to be protesting at this time. I'm compliant because, to be fair, it really hasn't treaded on my life that much aside from I can't, go out. So maybe I would feel differently. However, as someone that's, like compliant, it's not interfering with my soothing ability or whatever you want to call it. But maybe if I was on the other end and I didn't have work and I couldn't soothe, then maybe I would want to, go ahead and protest. But as someone that, even as someone who's, whatever, life hasn't been altered, I guess, as much as some of those people, I feel like there is room for protest as far as, hey, can we figure out a framework? Could we be prepared for stuff? Like those sort of things I feel like are fair, but because those are not the things that people are protesting, to me it does feel like this non-compliance is coming from a place of a lot of people, like they are afraid that their toys are going to get taken away, basically.
Well, and that's, I guess, another interesting point, or something that brings up a part of what I've been thinking about is the things that I'm mad about are like, why weren't we prepared for this? Why? And again, it's not like I saw it coming or you saw it coming, but we're not in a position to have seen it coming. Like I don't sit around studying this shit, but there are people who do. And those people recommended to, our leaders time and time again. I mean, from the sounds of it, that's what we're hearing now, where they're like, we don't have enough masks. We don't have enough respirators. We are in a position of weakness if something like SARS or worse were to come back. I mean, they've been saying that, or we're hearing reports of that, where there was a powder keg scenario, and it was just waiting for something like this to happen. And no, we're not to the point where millions have died, but it's like, I think where there has been a light shined is that we have very little preparation for something like this. Meanwhile, we spend just huge amounts of money on our military for a conflict that's likely never going to come, right? Like I think the physical wars of days past, although, Kim Jong-un just kicked the bucket maybe last night, so we'll see if World War III starts.
I thought, okay, I didn't see
it's
that.
Back
I know
and
he's
forth,
having some kind of heart surgery or whatever.
Yeah,
okay.
Apparently his sister is the heir apparent, and she's potentially crazier than he was, so that'll be, that'll be how 2020 ends.
That's cool.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, it's like,
guess it's a cure to a virus,
right? So maybe we will need that military. But yeah, it's like, we have no problem stockpiling all this other shit. I think because it's cool, right? Like everybody, like the military employs a ton of people. That's good, I guess. But then also in terms of like having the biggest, best tanks, jets, aircraft carriers, whatever, battleships, that's a tangible thing that we can point at and, line our dicks up with everybody else's and be like, But like having a bunch of like N95 masks in a warehouse in every city isn't as fun. So, I mean, from my standpoint, I feel like that's why we tend to spend less on that kind of shit, even though it's very practical and very cheap,
right.
relative. It's not as interesting, I think, to the taxpayers, perhaps, and therefore it's not as interesting to leadership. Maybe they'll rethink that now because we have this hindsight. But that's the kind of stuff where I'm getting a little upset. It's like these people have been suggesting that we prepare more for something like this, and meanwhile we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and we have such a low tax basis, and we spend the money on such stupid shit, and we have so few hospital beds. We talked about this in the quarantine episode, that it's spreading rampant here, where other countries have been able to quickly mitigate and lower lower the risk and flatten the curve, we're still ramping up. I mean, things have sort of maybe plateaued from a nationwide perspective. It's been a couple of days since I looked at the data. I know that some of the states have changed the methodology. I know New York added a bunch of cases that were like presumed to be deaths from COVID-19, but I mean, it's for sure not over here. Whereas other places, things have started to return to some level of normalcy. Here, I don't think we've been prepared, and that's what I'm upset about. Not about that this is like a conspiracy to limit my rights. I like, that's never occurred to me. And then beyond that, since the mandate has sort of been handed down, I'm going to try to adhere to it as closely as possible. Sure, maybe sometimes you go for a drive or something. You're not putting anybody at risk at that point. But these people that are like going to beaches and doing things that are either in direct defiance, like showing up and protesting with 1,000 other people, some of them without masks, it's like, whoa, are we going to see a big spike in cases because you just exposed yourself to a bunch of other people?
I'm worried about that. Yeah,
you know, and that's frustrating to watch.
I feel like it's complicated because, all right, so like you mentioned, going for drives doesn't put anyone at risk, right? But kind of like the boating scenario. If I go on a drive, then there has to be more patrols. If everyone goes on a drive, then there have to be more police that do patrols. I ordered Nerf guns and a bunch of bullshit. Someone had to package them. Someone had to ship them. And these things that I'm doing, you know, like going for drives, buying Nerf guns, they're all pleasure objects. It's all soothing. So it's hard to say because I feel like I have to be honest with myself about it, because this non-compliance, from my perspective, has a lot to do with soothing objects being taken away. Is there a potential that I would also be reacting that way should I not have the same sort of structure, the same sort of access to soothing objects? Because even I, like, you know, I've been ordering Nerf guns is not an essential item in a, you know, or me driving around is not. Yeah, go ahead.
Even that though, that's a good example though. So, in the case of the Nerf guns, should you just have been outright prohibited from ordering them? Because, like, I mean, from my standpoint, it's like, if it's truly non-essential or if it's truly something that's like adding to the risk, if there were cases of people contracting COVID-19 from like Amazon boxes, then I would imagine that there's a simple conclusion, which is like the government should then restrict to absolute only essential items. Like, you can only order food, personal care items, whatever. Dart guns obviously don't fall into those categories, so restrict access to it. Like, a decision would be made. The fact that you can do it, to me, is confirmation that it's probably okay. Just like driving your car, like, it's hard. You can't judge motive when somebody's in a car unless they pull you over and question you, which I've heard is happening in some places. Yeah. That's one where it's like, okay, maybe you're pulling a fast one by going for like a recreational drive, and it's not essential. You're not going for like an hour drive to the grocery store. You're just blowing off some steam, enjoying your car, enjoying the weather, whatever. Yes, I guess you're increasing the need for additional patrols or whatever. In the grand scheme of things, though, I find that much less egregious than a lot of the shit that's going on. Especially since if you fly off the road and hit a tree, someone's going to have to come scrape you off that tree, and that sideline them for a little bit. But that's not as bad as exposing, 1,000 other people at a beach in Miami. You know what I mean?
The slippery slope with it, though, is that it's a change in attitude. So I have an attitude change because I can't drive, or I can't just go to the store. This is how pathetic my life is. I like to go to Target every Friday night or Saturday. It's Friday or Saturday.
Is that Target's like just lit on Fridays now?
Dude, I can't not go to Target, man. It's hard, right?
What's your favorite part about Target? Like, why do you go?
All of it. Just the whole experience of going to Target. Of just going in there. There's a Starbucks right there. I get to see things that are interesting.
Target, get at us with sponsor, yo.
I would love that. I'd be totally cool with it. I don't know, man. I just like it. It hits all the little pieces. I go through there. I could like window shop. I do buy some things. I see some people. I can make fun of some people in my own head and think like, ooh, you're weird. And then I just go back to my life. And I feel really good about myself because I bought some stuff and I'm excited and I had a coffee and I made fun of people. But that's not available to me. So I found a new way to create this. I buy stuff from whatever, Target online or wherever I'm getting things from, right? So it's a slippery slope for me because it's more of an attitude shift, right? So my non-compliance may seem different than someone else's non-compliance, but at the core of it, I'm longing for my soothing object. So just by chance, my soothing object perhaps doesn't affect as many people. Again, by chance, because there's a whole logistical network that I don't even know how that works. That shit blows my mind that I could be affecting so many people. But my soothing object seems to fall within the arbitrary lines of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. If those things went away and I was feeling disconnected from work and everything like that, would I be one of those people that's that's justifying a protest out of something that's not rational? Because I think if we sat those people down under conditions that weren't these where they were feeling, desperate, scared, all of the above, I don't think that they would feel the same way.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we get it to the core of, given all the exact same situations and scenarios and environments, like, wouldn't we all reach the same conclusions as one another? Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, if you take out, obviously, like, there's some external factors like biology and whatever and mental conditions or whatever, but I mean, generally, I don't know, you tell me, you're the professional, but given the exact same set of factors that contribute to the environment, wouldn't we all reach the same types of conclusions?
Yeah, given, like you said, subtract genetics, subtract, some personality factors that were some combination of nature, nurture. But yeah, you take enough gratification objects away, and even the person that requires the least amount of gratification will start to lose it, right? Outside of intellect. And
I guess that's, it's that kind of stuff that I wish more people would hear, which is like, let's just have an honest conversation about the fact that nobody's insane or intentionally, well, let me qualify that. It's not that, leadership or your neighbor who has different political views or whatever. Like, it's not that people are, I think, intentionally just malicious and shitty and trying to make a decision that fucks you over. Right. I think it's that their situation's different and they're making a decision based on their environment that might be opposed to the one that you would make or did make or have made. But I think in the case of this opposition and the protesting, I keep coming back to the compliance thing and why it's so hard in these cases where, again, we've elected somebody to make the decisions for us. They've handed down these set of, in some cases, guidance, in other cases, mandates. And then we're like, well, now that it doesn't align with what I thought I would want to do, I don't agree with you anymore.
Well, this is where a good figurehead needs to come into play here, right? So, like, if all your soothing objects are gone, you need, like your mom or your dad to be like, hey, I know it's bad. It's bad for all of us, and we're going to get through this. And that's not what's going on. So on top of all soothing objects being gone, a lot of confusion. A lot of back and forth.
Well, right, and that's an interesting one when we think about, I think presidents have passed, because this issue would be an issue no matter what. I think the reaction at the state level and at the city level is where there's a big difference, because I could see on both sides of the aisle too. I could have seen an Obama saying, guys, like, I know that this is tough, but we need to like unify and just cool down. This is not the worst thing that's ever happened to people in the history of mankind. Stay at home, eat your DoorDash, order shit on Amazon, and just quiet down for a while. And I think that there would have been I think that would have not settled everybody down because tons of people disliked him, but I think people would have respected the guidance from somebody with authority like Obama. I could have seen George Bush saying that. I could have seen Clinton saying that. I could have seen, not just liberals or conservatives. I could have seen they had that leadership and at least a stick-to-itiveness. They would have had meetings in the background to say, like, what is the messaging on this? Okay, and then we're gonna stay the course on this. We're gonna unify behind the fact that, politics aside, this thing is bad. We need to stop the spread. We need to rip the Band-Aid off, and we need to move on from this so that we can open up the economy. For him, every other day he's contradicting what people are saying in certain states, and he's like, oh, he's misleading you guys about how many respirators he asked for, and then the next time he's like, oh, I had a great talk with Cuomo and it's great, everything's great there. Or he's like, Whitmer, people need to liberate these states, like what did he say the other? He had like a call to action to like liberate. It's like, Jesus, dude, you can't be saying shit like that when people are already gathering with guns and shit. That's like the lighting the pack of firecrackers and walking away and seeing what happens. And that's where I think we have the bigger issue, which is it doesn't change that there is a problem and that the underlying problem might not be something that everybody agrees on the solution to. But when you have the tip of the pyramid, the guy who's supposed to unify us all, every day is sort of changing his perspective on it and telling us to inject disinfectants or like stick lights inside of our bodies or use chemical or treatments that aren't necessarily proven yet. It's like, what the hell is going on? And I think that's just leading to further frustration and confusion,
and fear.
Yeah.
This thing too of so like the other figureheads that may be more decisive, that may like, okay, Como, Whitmer, whoever, the ones that have been gaining a lot of traction or getting a lot of coverage, or I'll say successful, and I don't mean in reducing numbers or something like that, but successful in terms of being consistent with what they've implemented. To have a situation where mom and dad are fighting with one another, this is like a divorce where you're trying to bring your kids into a situation, like a vulnerable population of like, listen to me, I'm right, that person's bad. And then you have a relationship with that person too, and you're like, but I thought mom was on my team, like she was good, but dad said that she was bad. So there's all these situations where no soothing objects, no figureheads being inconsistent, and then infighting within figureheads. So for me, again, I think we've tried sometimes to provide perspective or solutions or something in our talks, but I feel like it's very easy to see the people that are spinning out, like having, like tantrums. And I think it's important to maintain a perspective of, I know for myself, I could easily be one of those people spinning out too. In fact, my initial reaction to things shutting down, I think was very much tantrum-like and very just not able to understand. I don't know, man. I just wasn't able to capture what was going on because I was so freaked out by it all. So to really be honest and be able to empathize with the people and recognize that, like, man, they're spinning out. They're really spinning out. There's no clear direction. The parents are fighting. They can't soothe. They don't have means for money and things like that. They lost their general sense of purpose. The thing, we talked about during quarantine was like stay home for someone else. I kind of feel like I have a similar sort of take on this. Like, try to empathize with the people's scenario, and I think they may empathize with yours as well, even if they're the ones without the soothing objects, because if they can't make themselves feel good, and they have no sense of purpose, and their parents aren't being good parents and like keeping them posted, maybe they got to rely on like their friends and their peers to kind of just like be cool with them and maybe let them vent that shit, and maybe just like listen to them spin out a little bit and try not to like beat them up, because I really have a hard time believing that if the people were coming from a place where life existed before and they were feeling okay and they weren't under all this duress, that they would have the same sort of reaction. I don't think it's like just, like you said, I don't think it's shitty people. I don't think it's dumb people or crazy people. I think it's really stressed people, and the reaction is one that really creates a lot of separation. So like even within my family members, it's been kind of similar. Some of them, having some of these ideas that the protesters do, and it's difficult because if I just club them over the head with all sorts of statistical stuff, I feel like that's defeating the purpose, because I'm not able to, in that moment, connect with where they're at emotionally, which is why they're spinning out, because no one is giving them any kind of comfort or guidance or anything.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I think like in an ideal scenario, you wouldn't be affected by it at all, maybe financially. I think that's the biggest, if I boil things down to like the thing that I identify with the most in terms of why you would be upset or fearful, beyond, contracting the virus and dying. But I mean, like, in terms of the things that people are protesting, the financial aspect of it is scary. I understand why people are worried about that themselves. In an ideal scenario, you just wouldn't be impacted because perhaps you could just work from home. If you were, I guess the second best thing is that you have a support system, right? Like, you would hope that people would start to step in, and we're seeing that, right? People who aren't affected are stepping in and helping family and friends who are unable to work right now. There are workarounds for like restaurants where they're producing takeout meals and packaging them, doing curbside pickup. So like people are kind of adapting to it in some ways. For other ways where they just can't adapt, I think government is trying to subsidize income. They're trying to step in and beef up unemployment, things like that. So again, I get the financial aspect of it. I keep coming back to, you made a comment about your initial reaction to the decision to lock things down and what that was like. So I had the same reaction here, right? So San Francisco very early on locked things down. They declared a state of emergency. And this was like before, I'm trying to remember the chronology because everything blends together now, but I think it was, maybe there was the first death in Washington. And I don't even know that there were any confirmed cases in the Bay Area yet, but they understood, presumably, the traffic back and forth between mainland China, the huge population of people who travel throughout the country and the world here, and they made the decision to take preventative steps there. At the time, I remember I was caught in traffic because there was sort of a mass exodus from the city that day, and I was like, okay, this feels a little bit like a little early, a little bit too much too soon. In hindsight, that's probably all that prevented this from being Seattle 2, right? And with that hindsight, looking back, it's like, wow, they really, they had, I'm assuming, much more data than I did. There were a lot smarter people spending a lot more time thinking through this, thinking through the cost versus the benefit, and making a decision that was a tough one to make, but I think really paid off. And it's like, that's the kind of thing where I'm not one that's going to say, just blindly obey what the government says. But in cases like this, where I think everyone loses, right? Like, by shutting things down, everyone's donors. These guys, I mean, the rich are suffering, the poor are suffering, everybody's suffering. When the economy's not producing, that's bad for everyone. The only thing that we're trying to prevent is the spread of this disease. And to that end, it's like, I don't think that there's a secretive motive here. And in this case, I think that understanding the perspective of, your friends and peers and family, understanding what they're struggling with and offering to help in any way you can, is the direction that we should lean on, not let's gather up and protest it. Because I also just, in this case, don't think protesting is an effective tool.
Not in the way that it's happening, for sure.
I mean, we've talked about like, is this protest worthy? And also, like, how do Americans protest versus how do maybe other countries around the world sort of protest, and what is it usually about? I think here things are a lot more hot button here and a lot more emotional, maybe than like labor protests and things like that overseas. But I think that this is about understanding that there's a decision, we're doing the things that we're doing, and try to stick to the guidance as much as you can, obey the mandates as much as you can. If anybody needs help, let's have an open conversation about that. And I think people are willing to help. That's the thing. We see that all over the place, people stepping in to try to help. And likewise, what is a state? We're not going to get into the politics of it. What sort of a state versus a federal issue? I think that this is a great case where we're seeing where lines need to necessarily be drawn and how we shouldn't react to everything at a macro level. I mean, I do wish that at a federal level, Trump would sort of unify the message, but these are like very local issues, right? If there's an outbreak somewhere, we can't make a decision to like shut everything down forever at the federal level because there's a hot spot in some random spot in the middle of the country. However, we should unify behind the message and say, if you guys locally think that there's an issue here and we need to react that way, you continue to react that way. We're going to start to loosen restrictions elsewhere. But that message could be made very clear, and I think could back people down from the ledge if they didn't think that this was just an indefinite lockdown.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel I don't know, man. It's a complicated thing, obviously. That I feel like now, just kind of thinking through it and talking through it with you, it feels kind of exhausting because I played like a lot of internal ping pong. Yeah, what's that?
Because I talked so much.
No. Just like an internal ping pong with all of this, like
Right.
an internal ping pong that affects like currently, obviously, because we're all in it, every facet of existence right now or whatever, and it's like being pressed up against all sides, and everyone is freaked out and panicked, and there are people that are trying to help places, and there are other people that feel like they're not getting the help, and then I don't know, man. It's been like a really tricky thing. I think for me the I guess the thing I have to consider and keep thinking about is like, even at the top right now, people are having big reactions to it. So if they can't be the ones to see it through, and I can't have my soothing object, if that day I have enough in me, maybe I can give it to somebody else. Like maybe I can listen for a minute. Maybe I'll be the one that's bitching that day. Maybe you'll be the one that has to listen to a bit. I've noticed like even like between you and I, sometimes I'm like snippy and it has nothing to do with you. It'll just be like, I don't know. It got to me that day, man. Something got to me that day. But all that, it's like the reaction was just snippiness with you because, I don't know, the rest of my shit is okay. But yeah, I think if there's ever to be like a heal the world moment or like unify the world moment, maybe this could be the one here, so that we can all get on like the same agenda to recognize that we're all having to make a lot of compromise and consequence, and we got to be cool to kind of hold it together.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, once the dust settles, if we walk away from this and it was a unifying moment, because we've all had to live through this to some extent. I mean, again, it's varying levels of restriction in certain locales, but more or less, I mean, it's like that power outage back in like 2004 or whatever. Like everyone remembers that, and we were like unified, sort of in a stupid way, but like that was one thing that we could all be like, oh yeah, I remembered that and I lived through that. It wasn't something that there was a underlying political motivation or anything that could be argued. But I think in that way, I question whether we'll look back on this and be like, okay, we all need to have a conversation about being better prepared and how we react to things like this and what the right level of restriction is, or if it will have just sent people into their internet, social media echo chambers to just even build up more emotion about these hot button topics that we're going to come out of it and be even more polarized than we were before. That's what I worry about, especially in an election year. I don't know if this is going to further rile people up, or if it's going to kind of cool things down and let people understand that, like, if nothing else, it's like, take a good hard look at your leadership, local, city, state, federal.
I suspect there would be a lot more participation than there has been, just because of that. It has been in a situation where local leadership has been under the spotlight, let's say, more than it ever has.
Right, more than just like, hey, who's going to pave the goddamn roads versus like who's going to react to an epidemic the right way. Yeah. I don't know, but we're going to find out together one way or another.
Right, I hope so. Yeah. I don't know where we're at with time.
We're about there. So I mean, I guess it's tough to take a lesson away from this one. I would say, again, easy for us to say one way or the other. I think in this case, understand that there are tough decisions that have to be made. Understand that the people who are making them, I truly, for once in my life, feel like the decisions are being made outside of maybe our president for the most genuine reasons possible. They're trying to minimize death and the spread of this thing. Try to understand that while it's tough, and maybe you want to go on your boat, maybe you can't even work, that just try to take a step back and understand that this is perhaps a necessary evil, and to have an honest conversation with friends and family. Like, if you need help, go to them, have that conversation. It's tough. Nobody wants to have to do that, but I think everybody in a position to help wants to help. And so let's just all calm down for a little while. Let's try to taper things off. And then it's not going to be a switch that flips. I mean, like, I'm not an epidemiologist or anything, but I'm pretty confident to say that we're not going to just come into August if things flatten out and say, hey, go back to work. Don't wear a mask. This is going to be something that I think we have to live with, a new reality to some extent for years to come. I mean, it might just be the norm now that this is a new thing that flares up. You know, it's going to have a season. Maybe you got to wear masks a little bit more often. You got to, like, maybe handshakes are not as crucial as you thought they were. And, you know, that sucks. But hey, live and learn and adapt. And I think we all just need to realize that. Yeah.
And I want to add to that. I agree with everything you said. And I want to add one piece. If you're on the side of you and I feel like I am trying to remind myself, and I will. I've committed to it, regardless of how good I am at implementing it all the time. I'm trying to be open to hearing every part of it, because I know that the people that are having a hard time, it's just how the hard time is manifesting itself within them, not necessarily that they like want to attack me or my beliefs or something like that. So I'm trying to be open to that, and I think maybe other people should be too, in my opinion. And I think everyone that knows me knows I'm not like optimistic, nice guy, but I feel like I do have empathy. So yeah, I think let's all be cool, even to the ones who are really kind of spinning out, because, you know, in my case, it's like there's a lot of people that I'm close with that are spinning out, and it's really easy to get into an intellectual battle about it. But the reality is, it's not that they don't know. It's just that they're scared and kind of spinning out. So maybe if you're more stable at that moment in time, and you happen to be encountering someone that's kind of spinning out a little bit, panicking, whatever you want to call it, doesn't want to be compliant, maybe just kind of, you know, let them lean on you for a bit. Okay. Maybe it'll feel like they're throwing jabs, but just maybe that's the best that they can come up with at that time, and just know that they'll come out of it as soon as things begin to improve for them. So just have more empathy in general.
Good advice. Cool. Well, yeah, I should have done this at the top of it, but I just wanted to say, yeah, as always, if anybody wants to reach out, ask a question, circle back to a topic we talked about, if we missed something or if something upset you, if we were wrong, whatever. So on Twitter or Instagram, if you want to hit us up at InhumanPod, you could do that. Otherwise, email or inhumanpod@gmail.com is our email address. And thanks to, seems like some people are starting to actually find this now. That's great. So thanks for listening. If you make it to the end, here's your Easter egg. This is how to contact us. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.